My parents made me pay $1,500 a month to stay under their roof, while my sister lived rent-free. When I bought a house in cash, they went ballistic. The envelope sat beside my dinner plate like a death sentence wrapped in cream-colored paper. My name, Haley Morgan, typed in bold capital letters, perfectly centered. No handwriting, no personal touch, just cold corporate precision that made my stomach drop. Dad didn't even meet my eyes when I tore it open with trembling fingers. $1,500 a month, he announced, his voice as flat as if he were reading the weather forecast. Covers rent, utilities, internet, and your fair share of household expenses. I blinked hard at the itemized breakdown swimming before me. $950 base rent, $250 utilities, $300 household contribution. At the bottom, in unforgiving black ink, it read, due on the 1st. Late fees of $75 apply after the 5th. Across from me, my sister Amber twirled her spaghetti carbonara like she didn't have a care in the world. Her freshly manicured nails, French tips that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, caught the light as she scrolled through TikTok. She didn't even glance up when I made a small, strangled sound. But Amber doesn't have to, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. Amber's still finding herself, Mom interrupted smoothly, her tone dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she was about to deliver bad news. You have steady employment, Haley. 2 jobs, actually. It's time you learned what real responsibility looks like. Real responsibility. The words hit like a slap. I was responsible because I hadn't taken a single day off in 8 months. Because I worked my 9-to-5 at First National Bank, then raced across town to wait tables at Romano's until past midnight. Because I clipped coupons, skipped meals, and still lived in the bedroom I'd painted lavender when I was 12 years old. I stared at the invoice again, each number feeling like a verdict. When does this arrangement begin? Next Monday, Dad replied without looking up from his phone. We're confident you can handle it. Mom's fork clinked against her wine glass, the good crystal she only brought out for special occasions. Apparently, financially bleeding me dry qualified. And just so we're crystal clear, sweetie, late payments will incur that $75 penalty. That's how the adult world operates. I nodded because what else could I do? Scream? Cry? Demand to know why my 22-year-old sister got to live like a princess while I got treated like a tenant with the worst landlords in Colorado Springs? Instead, I folded the paper with mechanical precision, slipped it into my jeans pocket, and excused myself before the burning sensation in my chest cracked something vital inside me. Upstairs in my cramped room, I opened my laptop and pulled up my banking app. The numbers weren't great, but they weren't catastrophic either. I stared at the screen until my eyes watered, then opened a new Excel spreadsheet. I labeled it Rent Documentation, and started typing. Downstairs, Amber's laughter echoed through the house as she watched some influencer's morning routine. I created another column, Expenses they don't track. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about responsibility. They had no idea what I was actually learning. By the end of my first week under their adult responsibility program, I'd worked 6 bank shifts, for closing shifts at Romano's, and managed exactly 3 full meals. My wrists ached from carrying heavy trays loaded with plates I couldn't afford to order. My legs throbbed from standing for 14 hours straight, and my email inbox was a nightmare of overdraft warnings and payment reminders. When I dragged myself home Friday night at nearly 1 a.m., Amber was sprawled across our living room sectional like she owned the place. She was wearing my favorite Northwestern University hoodie, the one I'd saved up for months to buy, like it was just another item in her unlimited wardrobe. The TV played some reality dating show, and spread across the coffee table was an Amazon package addressed to me. But I hadn't ordered anything. Amber, I said, holding up the torn cardboard box. Did you use my credit card again? She didn't even pause her show. You said I could that one time. That was 6 months ago. For textbooks you never actually bought. A shrug. Well, you never changed the password. I stood there waiting, hoping, for even a hint of an apology. Instead, all I got was canned laughter from the television and the sound of her crunching on my bag of trail mix. Mom appeared from the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish rag. What's all the commotion about? She's still charging things to my credit card, I said quietly, hating how defeated I sounded. Mom sighed like I'd just complained about something as trivial as the weather. Haley, honey, Amber's trying to build her social media presence. You're the one with steady income. Why can't you support each other instead of keeping score like children? Support each other. The phrase made my stomach turn. They didn't see it as theft. They saw it as natural. Expected. I earned money, Amber spent it. Perfect balance in their twisted view of family dynamics. That night, I sat cross-legged on my bed and scrolled through my credit card statement with growing horror. Charges I'd never made: Sephora, Ulta Beauty, DoorDash orders, a premium Spotify subscription, monthly meal kits from Blue Apron. None of it mine. All of it billed to the card that was supposed to be for emergencies only. I opened my spreadsheet and created a new tab, Amber's unauthorized charges. Then I opened another browser window and typed, how to dispute family credit card fraud. My finger hovered over the enter key for a long moment. Instead, I opened a new tab and searched, Best High Yield Savings Accounts Colorado 2024. The research kept me up until dawn, but something had shifted. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was planning. I opened the account during my lunch break on a Tuesday, but not at First National where I worked. Too many eyes, too many questions. Instead, I drove 20 minutes across town to Mountain View Credit Union, a small building tucked between a Starbucks and a dry cleaner that most people probably drove past without noticing. Perfect. I used my work email address, set up a P.O. box for all correspondence, and funded the account with the $800 quarterly bonus I'd earned for exceeding my sales targets. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A quiet rebellion hidden in plain sight. Any particular reason for the separate institution? Asked Linda, the friendly account representative who looked like someone's favorite aunt. Just diversifying, I said with a smile that felt more genuine than any expression I'd worn at home in months. That evening, I updated my spreadsheet with obsessive precision. Tab by tab, I cataloged everything: rent payments in green, utility contributions in blue, groceries I'd bought for the household in yellow, and Amber's digital theft in angry red. Each cell felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of my sanity. 2 days later, I was processing deposits at my teller window when my coworker Jake leaned over the divider separating our stations. Jake had the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about money, but he was sharp as a tack when it came to financial patterns. You've been looking like you're preparing for an audit, he said with his trademark crooked grin. Everything okay? Maybe I am, I muttered, balancing another customer's transaction. He raised an eyebrow, and before I could stop myself, the whole story came pouring out. Not everything, I wasn't stupid, but enough. The rent invoice, Amber's credit card shopping sprees, the unspoken rules that governed our house like some twisted game where only I knew I was playing. Want to see something interesting? Jake asked when I finished. He pulled up a public records database on his computer screen. Your parents refinanced their mortgage last year. My heart skipped. So, look at the payment history. His finger traced across the screen. They're behind. At least 90 days, maybe more. I stared at the numbers, my mouth going dry. But I've been paying them $1,500 a month. Exactly. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. They're not teaching you responsibility, Haley. They're using your paycheck to keep their heads above water. That's not education, that's exploitation. That night, I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 20 minutes before driving home. My hands shook as I added a new row to my spreadsheet, mortgage contribution, in bold letters. Underneath, I typed, this isn't about helping me grow. This is about keeping them from drowning. Then I made 2 copies, one saved to my desktop, another uploaded to the cloud, and labeled the folder evidence. I closed my laptop and stared out at the parking lot lights, calculating how long it might take to save enough money to escape. The number felt impossible, the timeline crushing. But I wasn't just working anymore. I was documenting. And documentation, I was learning, could be its own form of power. It started with Jake sliding his phone across the break room table during our rushed lunch, a mischievous glint in his eyes that I'd learned meant he'd found something interesting. Check this out, he said, pointing to a real estate listing on his screen. I expected to see some overpriced McMansion or a rundown fixer-upper that would drain someone's savings for decades. Instead, I found myself looking at a modest 3-bedroom ranch house with hardwood floors, updated windows, and even a small backyard with mature oak trees. The price tag made me do a double take. It's listed way under market value, Jake explained. Owner's going through a messy divorce and needs to sell fast. Cash offers get priority. I can't afford a house, I said automatically, though my voice lacked conviction. Jake shrugged. Maybe not today. But you've been saving, right? And with what you're paying your parents, you're basically covering a mortgage payment anyway. He wasn't wrong. $1,500 a month for a bedroom in a house where I wasn't even welcome was insane when I could be building equity instead of funding their financial mismanagement. That night, after my shift at Romano's, I stayed up until 3 a.m. researching everything I could find about real estate purchases, LLC formations, and privacy protection for property ownership. By sunrise, I had a plan that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. The next day, I reached out to Mrs. Patterson, a long-time bank customer who'd mentioned she had her real estate license. She was semi-retired, sharp as a whip, and had always been kind to me during her frequent visits to make deposits for her late husband's small business. We met at a quiet coffee shop on the outskirts of town, away from anywhere my family might accidentally see us. I need to buy a house, I told her, but I need my name kept off the public records. She didn't even blink. LLC purchase. You'll be the sole member, but the property will be owned by the business entity. What were you thinking for a name? I hadn't really considered it, but when she handed me a notepad to jot down ideas, one word came out without hesitation: Phoenix Properties. Mrs. Patterson smiled. Rising from the ashes. I like it. The paperwork moved faster than I'd expected. Jake helped me organize my financial documents, Mrs. Patterson handled the legal filings, and within 2 weeks, I had a folder labeled Phoenix Properties LLC and a business checking account that felt like the first step toward freedom. Each night, I continued my routine of packing small boxes, clothes, books, art supplies I hadn't touched in years, and storing them in my car trunk. During lunch breaks, I'd drive them to a storage unit I'd rented under the LLC's name. Nobody at home noticed my belongings slowly disappearing. Amber was too busy with her ring light and sponsored content, and my parents assumed my exhaustion explained everything. They weren't entirely wrong. I was exhausted. But for the first time in months, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like preparation. I chose a Wednesday for my exit. Everyone would be out, schedules as predictable as clockwork. Amber had her weekly yoga class, the one she attended more for the Instagram photos than the actual exercise. Mom volunteered at the animal shelter every Wednesday afternoon, and Dad played golf with his high school buddies who still acted like they were 18. I'd rehearsed the timing down to the minute. Jake met me that morning in the bank parking lot, his Jeep idling as he helped me load the heavier boxes I'd been storing in my car. You sure about this? He asked, though his expression said he already knew my answer. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The house felt different when I walked through it one last time, collecting my remaining belongings. Smaller somehow. Less significant. My toiletries went into a canvas bag, the last drawer of clothes into a duffel bag, my laptop into its protective case. Everything that mattered to me fit neatly into the back seat of my Honda Civic. On my nightstand, I left my house key, the one I'd carried since I was 16, when getting my driver's license had felt like the most important milestone in the world. On the kitchen table, I placed a single sheet of paper folded in half. The outside simply read Mom and Dad in my careful handwriting. Inside, as of today, I'm moving out. Rent will no longer be paid to this address. All utilities and services in my name will be disconnected within 48 hours. Please forward any mail to the address on file with First National Bank. Haley. No emotions. No explanations. No room for negotiation. Just facts, delivered with the same cold precision they'd used in that first invoice. I stood in the doorway for exactly 30 seconds, letting myself absorb the silence of the house one final time. The living room still smelled like Mom's vanilla candles, and Amber's bedroom door was cracked open, revealing the chaos of clothes and makeup she'd never learned to organize. My old academic awards still lined the hallway: debate team captain, honor roll, perfect attendance, achievements they displayed like trophies proving they'd raised someone worthwhile. I closed the front door behind me without looking back. In my car, I pulled out my phone and methodically went down my contacts list. Mom, blocked. Dad, blocked. Amber, blocked. The family group chat that had been buzzing with demands and guilt trips for months, left and blocked. The silence that followed was immediate and profound, like finally turning off a machine that had been grinding in the background of my life for years. Mrs. Patterson called an hour later with news that made my hands shake. Your offer was accepted. Phoenix Properties officially owns the house. We'll close within 3 weeks. I pressed my forehead against my steering wheel and closed my eyes. Not relief, not yet. But the quiet knowledge that this wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was real. It was happening. It was mine. They found me faster than I'd expected, but not fast enough to catch me unprepared. The letter must have arrived that morning, a crisp white envelope addressed to current resident at their address, containing formal notification that their mortgage had been officially transferred to Phoenix Properties LLC, effective immediately. Mrs. Patterson texted me a photo she'd taken from her car across the street, Mom standing on the front porch in her bathrobe, mouth hanging open as she clutched the notice like it might evaporate. Dad stood behind her, his jaw clenched so tight I could practically see the vein throbbing in his temple even through the grainy phone camera. Amber hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, her perfect eyebrows furrowed in confusion. By evening, they were at my door. I watched them through the peephole of my temporary sublet, a small apartment Jake's cousin had agreed to let me rent month to month. Dad wore his serious conversation polo shirt, the navy blue one he'd put on for parent-teacher conferences and bank meetings. Mom kept wringing her hands, and Amber lurked behind them like she was attending a funeral. I opened the door halfway, positioning myself in the threshold so they couldn't push past me. Haley, sweetheart, Mom began, her voice artificially bright. We received some very confusing paperwork today. Something about our mortgage being transferred? There must be some mistake. There's no mistake, I said calmly. Dad's face darkened. You know something about Phoenix Properties? I know everything about Phoenix Properties. I am Phoenix Properties. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on their faces like a slow-motion car crash, first confusion, then disbelief, then something that looked almost like fear. Mom recovered first, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. Honey, this is all very dramatic. But Amber's going to need somewhere to stay while we figure this situation out. Just temporarily. You've always been so responsible, so generous with family. Basement couch, I interrupted. $1,500 a month. Late fees apply after the 5th. Amber's head snapped toward me like I just suggested she eat glass. Are you insane? Just applying the education you gave me, I replied. You always said I needed to learn how the real world works. Dad's face went from red to purple. This isn't a game, Haley. We're your family. I tilted my head, studying his expression with detached curiosity. You were my family. Right up until you handed me a typed invoice and called it love. Mom's voice cracked. We didn't mean for it to feel like. I know exactly what you meant it to feel like, I said. And it worked. I learned everything you taught me. I just took the lesson a little further than you expected. I stepped back inside and began closing the door. Their voices rose in protest, but there was no shouting, no pounding on the wood. Just the hollow quiet of people who had finally run out of control to wield. That night, I opened my laptop and created a new document, Interaction Log Visit Number 1. I had a feeling I'd need to document everything that came next. The second confrontation came a week later, and this time they didn't bother with pretense. They sat in my tiny living room like defendants waiting for a verdict, all nervous energy and sideways glances. I'd prepared for this moment. On the coffee table sat a manila envelope thick with 2 years of documentation, every rent payment, every utility split, every grocery receipt, every unauthorized credit card charge. Color-coded tabs marked different categories of their exploitation, organized with the same obsessive precision they demanded from me. I kept everything, I said, sliding the envelope toward them. Because you taught me to. Mom opened it with trembling fingers. Dad leaned over her shoulder as they flipped through pages of evidence. Bank statements, photographs of invoices, printed emails, even screenshots of Amber's social media posts showing off purchases made with my credit card. It took them several minutes to understand the scope of what they were looking at. 2 years of financial records, I explained conversationally. Every dollar you extracted from me, every expense you ignored when it came to Amber, every bill you made me pay while your mortgage went into default. Dad found the property deed at the back of the stack. His hands shook as he read it. This is real. As real as that first rent invoice you gave me. But how did you, Mom started. You gave me an education in manipulation disguised as responsibility, I said. I just put it to better use than you expected. Dad's shoulders sagged like a deflating balloon. We were trying to prepare you for adulthood. You were using me as a human ATM while you spoiled my sister and lied about your financial situation. I stood up, smoothing my jeans. But you're right about one thing, I learned what I needed to learn. I walked them to the door, handed Mom the envelope, and waited while they filed out like chastened children. You'll receive a new payment schedule next week, I called after them. All communications go through the property management email. No exceptions. The door closed with a satisfying click. 6 months later, I stood in the sunlit studio of my own house. The one Phoenix Properties had purchased with cash, far enough from my parents' neighborhood to feel like a different world entirely. My easel held a half-finished painting, the first I'd completed in 3 years. Art supplies I'd forgotten I owned were arranged on shelves I'd built myself. The house was quiet in the way that only comes with true ownership, not just of property, but of your own life. My phone buzzed with a text from the family group chat I'd rejoined after they'd started making regular mortgage payments. Amber got a job at the salon downtown. We're caught up on bills. Thank you for everything. I read it twice, then set the phone aside and picked up my paintbrush. Some lessons, I'd learned, were worth teaching. Others were worth living. Through the window, afternoon light painted everything golden, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Phoenix Properties was more than just a business name now. It was exactly what Mrs. Patterson had said, something beautiful rising from the ashes of what came before. And I was finally, completely, unmistakably free.